The most hurtful enemy is not the one who opposes you openly from afar. It is the one who sits at your dining table, smiling while quietly pouring bitterness into your cup.
At 32 years old, I, Beatrice Sterling, lived a quiet life that looked entirely peaceful from the outside. I worked as a senior textile designer at Aura Creative Studio, a boutique fabric firm where I spent long, meditative hours bringing forgotten historical patterns back to life. I was gentle, modest, and rarely raised my voice, carrying a calm stillness that many mistook for fragility. Beside me was my husband of 4 years, Gabriel. Gabriel was a brilliant, incredibly observant architect with a sharp mind and a protective nature that never wavered. To the world, our marriage was built on quiet harmony, a safe haven away from the noise of the city. This story is brought to you by Life Sketch Stories. Listen closely until the very end, because you never know what will happen next. But beneath the serene surface of my life lay a dark, lingering shadow. My mother, Victoria, and my 24-year-old half-sister, Daphne. Ever since my father passed away when I was a teenager, Victoria had treated me not as a daughter, but as an obstacle to be used and discarded. When she remarried and had Daphne, the dynamic became painfully clear. Daphne was the adored princess who received every ounce of warmth, affection, and praise. I was the dutiful eldest child, expected to stay silent, handle every family burden, and hand over my happiness whenever Daphne demanded it. If I bought a beautiful dress, Victoria would convince me to give it to Daphne. If I achieved something at work, Victoria would dismiss it instantly, turning the spotlight toward Daphne's latest whim. For years, I endured their emotional coldness in silence, believing that if I gave enough, perhaps one day they would love me back. I was wrong. It was a crisp Saturday afternoon when Victoria and Daphne showed up at our house unannounced, carrying heavy suitcases under the guise of an emergency house repair at their apartment. Daphne stepped through the front door wearing a tight silk dress, her heavy perfume filling our entryway. She didn't look at me. Her eyes swept across our home, landing directly on Gabriel, who was standing near the hallway staircase in a simple white linen shirt and dark trousers. "Oh, Gabriel," Daphne purred softly, walking right past me as if I were invisible. She placed her manicured hand directly on Gabriel's forearm, tilting her head with a delicate, helpless smile. "Oh, it's so good to see you. We were so worried when our apartment pipes leaked, but knowing we could come here to you makes me feel so much safer." I stood by the doorway, my chest tightening as I watched her fingers linger on my husband's arm. Gabriel didn't smile. He gently stepped backward, smoothly disengaging his arm from her touch. His dark eyes were calm, calculating, and completely detached as he looked at Daphne, then at Victoria. "Welcome," Gabriel said, his voice quiet, steady, and void of any warmth. "Beatrice's guest room is ready upstairs. I'll take your bags." That evening, Victoria sat at our dinner table, inspecting the meal I had spent 3 hours preparing with a look of mild disgust. "Beatrice, this soup is far too salty," Victoria said sharply, pushing her bowl away with a dramatic sigh. "You were always careless with details. Daphne's cooking is much more refined, isn't it, Gabriel? A man of your status deserves a wife who knows how to cultivate true elegance." I felt the familiar, heavy ache bloom in my chest. Before I could speak, Gabriel set his spoon down with a soft, deliberate click against the porcelain plate. "The soup is exquisite, Victoria," Gabriel said, his voice calm, even, and sharp as a razor. "Beatrice is a master of her craft, both in her work and in our home. If the food doesn't suit your taste, you are free to dine elsewhere." Victoria froze, her eyes widening in indignation. Beside her, Daphne let out a faint, melodious laugh, shifting slightly in her seat to catch Gabriel's eye under the warm dining light. "Don't be so harsh, Gabriel," Daphne whispered, her voice dropping into a soft, intimate tone as she reached across the table to touch his napkin. "Mom just wants the best for you. We both do." Gabriel didn't flinch. He slowly picked up his napkin, folded it neatly, and placed it out of Daphne's reach. He turned his head to look directly into my eyes, his expression softening into profound warmth as he reached across to hold my hand. "I already have the best, Daphne, and nothing in this world could ever change that." I looked at Gabriel, my heart swelling with relief. But beneath Daphne's sweet, innocent smile, I saw a flicker of unyielding bitterness. She wasn't just here because of a broken pipe. Daphne had spent her entire life taking everything that belonged to me, and now she had set her eyes on my husband. Little did Daphne and Victoria know, Gabriel wasn't an innocent bystander waiting to be manipulated. He had already noticed the hidden scars on my soul, and together we were about to set a trap that would tear their grand illusions apart. The days following their arrival became an uncomfortable game of subtle provocations. Victoria made it a habit to constantly criticize my homemaking, while Daphne looked for every opportunity to be alone with Gabriel. Whenever Gabriel sat in his home study working on architectural blueprints, Daphne would wander in, wearing faint pastel dresses, carrying cups of tea she hadn't made, or asking naive questions about home design. She would lean far over his desk, letting her hand brush against his shoulder. "Gabriel," Daphne would murmur softly, her voice dripping with artificial warmth. "You work so hard. Beatrice is always so busy with her fabrics. Doesn't it get lonely sitting here by yourself?" Gabriel never raised his voice. He never flinched. He simply slid his blueprints into a leather folder, stood up calmly, and stepped out into the living room where I was sitting. "Beatrice, my love," Gabriel would say, loudly enough for Daphne to hear, coming to sit right beside me on the sofa and kissing me my forehead. Daphne's face would darken with unspoken frustration as she stood in the doorway, watching Gabriel put his arm around my waist. She was unaccustomed to failing. For 24 years, every man she targeted had fallen for her helpless, charming act, but Gabriel was like an impenetrable fortress. By the end of the second week, Victoria and Daphne realized that subtle flirtation was not working. They needed a more calculated approach to drive a wedge between Gabriel and me. It was a rainy Tuesday afternoon. I was away at Aura Creative Studio finalizing a major heritage fabric exhibition, leaving Gabriel alone at home working from his study. Daphne saw her opportunity. She waited until Victoria went out to meet some acquaintances, then dressed in an elegant silk outfit, brewed a pot of tea, walked into Gabriel's study, and intentionally tripped near his desk, spilling the hot tea across the wooden floor and letting out a sharp, dramatic cry. Gabriel immediately pushed his chair back and stood up. "Are you all right, Daphne?" Instead of stepping back, Daphne threw her arms around Gabriel's neck, clinging to him tightly and sobbing into his chest. "Oh, Gabriel, it hurts," she cried dramatically, wrapping her fingers into the fabric of his shirt. "I'm so foolish. I just wanted to be useful to you. Beatrice never appreciates you the way I do. If I were your wife, I would devote my entire life to making you happy." Gabriel didn't hug her back. His arms remained planted firmly at his sides. His face was cold, impassive, and completely expressionless. At that exact moment, the front door unlocked and I stepped into the house, shaking rain from my umbrella. Hearing the commotion in the study, I walked down the hallway and froze at the doorway. I saw my half-sister holding on to my husband, crying softly against his chest. Daphne glanced over Gabriel's shoulder, saw me standing in the doorway, and secretly flashed me a subtle, triumphant smirk before instantly melting back into her helpless act. "Oh, Beatrice," Daphne gasped, quickly pulling back with simulated panic, wiping her face. "I'm so sorry. I slipped and Gabriel caught me. It wasn't what it looked like, I swear. Please don't be mad at Gabriel. It was all my fault." She was setting the stage for a classic misunderstanding, hoping I would burst into tears, scream at Gabriel, and create an irreparable rift in our marriage. I stood there silently, looking at Daphne, then at Gabriel. Gabriel looked directly at me. He didn't offer a panicked explanation. He didn't stammer. He simply reached into his vest pocket, pulled out a small metallic black device, and pressed a button. A faint beep echoed through the quiet room. "You don't need to lie, Daphne," Gabriel said, his voice dropping into an ice-cold, authoritative tone that made Daphne's breath hitch. "My study has been equipped with subtle motion-activated audio and visual security cameras since the day I built this house. Every second of your performance, including your statement about replacing my wife, has been recorded in high definition." Daphne's face drained of color in an instant. She stumbled back a step, looking up at the subtle lens concealed near the wooden ceiling beam. You recorded me?" Daphne stammered, her voice cracking as her sweet facade crumbled into dust. "I record everything that enters my private workspace," Gabriel replied smoothly, walking over to me and wrapping a warm, protective hand around my waist, especially when uninvited guests tried to disturb my family's peace. I looked at my sister, feeling no fear or anger, only a profound, quiet strength provided by the man standing beside me. "Daphne," I said softly, my voice calm and unwavering, "pack your bags. Both of you and Mother are leaving my house tonight." The rain outside drummed heavily against the glass windows of the study, matching the tense, suffocating silence inside the room. Daphne stood frozen, her eyes wide with disbelief as she stared at the hidden security camera near the ceiling beam. The charming, helpless maiden persona she had cultivated for years disintegrated completely, leaving behind a bitter, desperate young woman. "You lied to me," Daphne hissed, her voice trembling with fury as she glared at Gabriel. "You acted like you were just being polite, but you were setting a trap for me the whole time." Gabriel adjusted his watch calmly, his dark eyes fixed on her with absolute detachment. "I didn't set a trap, Daphne," Gabriel said quietly, his voice smooth and cold. "You walked into your own web. I simply ensured my wife would never have to doubt my loyalty for a single second." Just then, the front door opened and Victoria walked into the foyer, holding a damp coat. Hearing Daphne's raised voice, she hurried down the hallway and burst into the study. "What on earth is going on here?" Victoria demanded, her eyes sweeping over the scene. She immediately rushed to Daphne's side, wrapping an arm around her shoulder. "Beatrice, why is your sister crying? What did you do to her?" Daphne turned to Victoria, instantly producing fresh tears. "Mom, Gabriel recorded me. He has cameras in here. He's trying to humiliate me and make it look like I tried to come between them." Victoria's face flushed with artificial anger. She pointed a sharp, manicured finger directly at me. "Beatrice, how dare you allow your husband to insult your own sister like this?" Victoria barked, her voice echoing off the walls. "Daphne is family. She came here because she needed a safe place, and you treat her like a criminal? You have always been jealous of her since you were girls." I took a deep breath, stepping out from behind Gabriel's protective shadow. For 32 years, I had bowed my head whenever Victoria raised her voice. I had handed over my toys, my clothes, my time, and my pride just to keep the peace. But looking at my mother now, seeing the hollow, manipulative anger in her eyes, I felt no fear. The heavy chain of guilt she had wrapped around my heart for decades finally snapped. "I am not jealous of Daphne, Mother," I said steadily, clear and unyielding, "and I am no longer the quiet child who will absorb your cruelty so Daphne can shine. Both of you entered my home under the lie of an emergency repair, but your real goal was to break my marriage." "How dare you speak to your mother like that?" Victoria shouted. "After everything I sacrificed to raise you." "You sacrificed nothing for me," I interrupted firmly, looking her straight in the eyes. "You used me as an unpaid servant and a scapegoat while showering Daphne with everything I earned, but that ends today." Gabriel stepped forward, pulling a thin, elegant black folder from his desk drawer. He placed it squarely on the center of the desk. "Victoria," Gabriel said calmly, "I have already arranged private transport to take both of your suitcases to a long-term residential hotel in the Northern District. Your bags are already packed and loaded." Victoria gasped, her jaw dropping in shock. "You packed our bags? You have no right?" "I have every right to protect my home and my wife," Gabriel replied, his tone leaving zero room for argument. "The driver is waiting outside. If you do not leave quietly within 5 minutes, I will share the footage from this room, along with audio recordings of every disrespectful comment you made about Beatrice over the last 2 weeks with your entire social circle." Victoria's face drained of color. Her entire social standing depended on the false image of a loving, noble family. Exposure would ruin the delicate web of lies she had spent years building. Daphne clutched Victoria's arm, her lip trembling in genuine panic. "Mom, let's just go." Victoria glared at me with deep, bitter resentment, but she couldn't utter another word. Without another glance at Gabriel, she pulled Daphne by the hand and hurried down the hallway toward the front door. A heavy, peaceful quiet returned to our home as the front door clicked shut. I stood in the center of the quiet hallway, listening to the rain outside. Gabriel walked over to me, wrapping his warm arms around my shoulders, pulling me gently against his chest. "Are you all right, my love?" he whispered softly, resting his chin against my head. I buried my face in his shoulder, letting out a long, shuddering breath, a breath I felt like I had been holding for 32 years. "I'm more than all right," I whispered back, holding him tightly. "I'm finally free." But as Gabriel held me, I noticed a subtle, intense look in his eyes as he glanced toward his desk folder, a quiet, unreadable expression that told me the story was far from over. There was a deeper truth hidden behind Gabriel's protective actions, a hidden link between his past and my family that I had yet to discover. The days following Victoria and Daphne's departure brought a tranquility to our home that I had never experienced in my 32 years of life. Without my mother's critical remarks echoing through the hallways or Daphne's lingering manipulative presence, the air felt lighter. I threw myself into my work at Aura Creative Studio, designing an intricate new series of hand-woven botanical tapestries inspired by resilience and renewal. Yet, as the weeks passed, a quiet mystery began to take root in my mind. Gabriel had defended me with a level of precision that felt far too calculated to be coincidental. He'd installed specialized cameras in his study, anticipated their subtle tactics, and handled them with an absolute, unwavering focus. As if he hadn't just reacted to their behavior, he had expected it. It was a quiet Sunday morning. Gabriel had gone to a site inspection for a new architectural project on the far side of the city. While organizing the bookshelf in our living room, I accidentally bumped a heavy, hard-bound volume of historical architecture. As it tumbled onto the soft rug, a thin, silver-keyed leather journal slipped out from behind the hidden panel inside the bookshelf's frame. I picked it up gently. It was Gabriel's personal journal, dating back nearly 6 years ago, 2 years before he and I had ever met. My fingers hesitated over the cover. I had never invaded Gabriel's privacy, but an unexplainable instinct whispered that the answers to my quiet questions lay behind its pages. I opened the journal, turning to an entry marked 6 years prior. My breath hitched in my throat as I saw my father's name written across the yellowed parchment. I read line by line, my eyes scanning Gabriel's precise, dark script. Today, I attended the memorial of Mr. Sterling, a legendary textile historian whose work inspired my early architectural designs. I stood near the back of the hall, unnoticed. I watched his widow, Victoria, and her younger daughter step into a luxury car, completely indifferent to the loss. But near the flower arch stood his eldest daughter, Beatrice. She looked so fragile, carrying the entire weight of the family's grief alone, while her mother demanded her silence. I made a promise to myself that day. If our paths ever cross, I will build a fortress around her that no one can ever tear down. Tears pooled in my eyes, dropping softly onto the page. Tucked inside the back pocket of the journal was a folded set of private auction receipts and inventory records from 6 years ago, concrete proof detailing how my father's precious hand-woven fabric archives had been quietly sold off by Victoria immediately after his passing to fund Daphne's elite schooling. Attached to the documents was a note in Gabriel's handwriting. Victoria didn't just neglect Beatrice, she systematically stripped away her father's legacy to favor Daphne. I have spent the last few years quietly acquiring those original fabric archives back from private collectors. They are preserved safely in a climate-controlled archive room, waiting for the day Beatrice is strong enough to claim what was always hers. The room seemed to spin around me as the profound truth washed over my soul. Gabriel hadn't just fallen in love with me by chance 4 years ago. He had known the full extent of my family's hidden betrayal long before I ever recognized it myself. He had spent years quietly protecting my father's memory, waiting for the right moment to restore everything that had been stolen from me in the dark. The front door clicked open. Gabriel stepped into the foyer, shaking his coat off. He walked into the living room, stopping in his tracks when he saw me standing by the bookshelf, holding his open journal with tears streaming down my face. Gabriel stood in the doorway of the living room, his dark eyes softening as he saw the open journal in my hands and the tears glistening on my cheeks. He set his coat aside and walked toward me with steady, quiet steps. "You weren't meant to find that just yet, Beatrice," he said softly, reaching out to gently wipe a tear from my face with his thumb. "Gabriel," my voice trembled as I looked into his eyes. "You've been protecting me long before I even knew who you were." Gabriel took my hands in his, leading me to the sofa. "6 years ago, when I saw you standing alone at your father's memorial, carrying all that grief while your mother and sister ignored you, I saw a woman of extraordinary strength. I knew your father's legacy deserved to be honored, not stripped away. So over the years, I quietly located every piece of his historical fabric archive that Victoria sold off, buying them back one by one." He reached into his inner jacket pocket and handed me a small brass key. "They are all preserved in the climate-controlled archive room at my family's private estate," Gabriel whispered. "Every design, every rare weave, every memory your father left behind. They are yours, Beatrice. They always were." A surge of emotion swelled within me. For years, I believed I was entirely alone, fighting an uphill battle against a family that only took from me. But all along, a quiet, unshakable fortress had been built around me by a man who loved me unconditionally. 6 months later, the Aura Creative Studio held its largest annual heritage exhibition in the Central Hall of the City Museum. The main gallery was illuminated by warm, focused lighting, showcasing the fully restored historical fabric archives of my late father, a collection that was thought to be lost forever. A bronze plaque mounted at the entrance read, "The Sterling Historical Collection, preserved and curated by Beatrice Sterling." Designers, collectors, and journalists filled the room, praising the delicate craftsmanship and resilience represented in every frame. Standing near the back of the crowd, dressed in plain, faded clothes and looking entirely out of place, were Victoria and Daphne. Having long spent every penny from selling my father's original archives, they'd hatched a joint scheme. Victoria pushed from behind, while Daphne eagerly weaponized her charm to secure Gabriel's wealth and status for themselves. But with Gabriel shutting them out and exposing their greedy plot to our circle, their financial lifeline vanished. Deprived of the luxury they had stolen, their artificial status collapsed, leaving them to face the reality of their own poor choices in total obscurity. Daphne looked at me with bitter envy, but as her eyes met mine, she saw no anger or desire for vengeance, only a calm, unshakable composure. They had failed to take my husband, failed to destroy my happiness, and failed to erase my father's name. Gabriel stepped up beside me, slipping his hand smoothly into mine and wrapping his arm around me as photo flashes lit up the room. I leaned into his side, looking at the vibrant tapestries that filled the hall, feeling a profound, everlasting peace. This story reminds us that true love is defined not by loud promises, but by quiet protection and unwavering loyalty. No matter how clever a deceitful scheme may seem, a marriage built on deep trust and genuine integrity will always remain an impenetrable fortress. Thank you for listening to this entire story on Life Sketch Stories. If Beatrice's resilience and Gabriel's unwavering support touched your heart today, make sure to hit that like button, leave your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel for more powerful narratives. See you in our next story.